Kids were freaking out. Some kids froze. Some kids were on their phones. A lot were on their phones just trying to Snapchat everything because they thought it was a joke and it wasn't. There's kids freaking out, students freaking out, teachers. It sucked.
Now, Governor Rick Scott has spoken with the president, President Trump. He has updated President Trump on the situation. The president has since tweeted, quote, "My prayers and condolences to the families of the victims of the terrible Florida shooting. No child, teacher, or anyone else should ever feel unsafe in an American school." Also important to note that President Trump is expected to be at the Winter White House in Mar-a-Lago this weekend, which is only about 30 or 40 miles from where the shooting took place. Not sure if he'll make a stop down there. But we want to bring in former FBI agent and Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam. John, another tragic situation. I'm always struck by the scenes of the students leaving the schools. What are your thoughts when you hear the limited information we have at this point?
Well, I tell you, there's a couple things from what I've heard so far. One, it appears as though this student isn't just known, but is known by several other students as being kind of an off student, somebody who was really into guns, but also was kind of a fallback student, was held back several times. And so he sounds like a troubled student. That's the first thing. So there's no surprise there. The fact that we are still looking at situations in schools where a bad guy can penetrate into a classroom is shocking to me. It is really shocking that we have not hardened our schools better than this. So as we could see, in the short period of time that this shooter was in this school, where now the fatalities and the injuries are starting to increase. And I think this is a good example of what we're seeing here of how, and I don't want to bury this thing with politics, but the reality is politics is one of the things that's kept these schools from being secure. And we have literally millions of veterans and retired law enforcement that would volunteer time to stand at these schools and in the limited amount of access points that there are to get into these schools. But nobody will do that. They won't allow guns to be carried in schools by teachers. They won't allow former law enforcement and military veterans to volunteer their time, armed or not, to stand there and protect these schools. Their solution is just don't let anybody have a gun in there. But as we can see, bad guys will always have access to guns no matter what. So this is another tragic situation that ultimately, I believe, could have been prevented.
You know, John, when I was a local news reporter and you'd cover one of these shootings, almost invariably you kind of look outside the school and you'd see this is a gun-free zone. And you just kind of throw up your hands, just thinking about the things you just mentioned. And you're not, of course, the first to politicize the event. You're not really politicizing it, but you make a good point. Right. These days, when these types of shootings happen, there's usually one guy who is the first person to go straight to the politicization of this type of event, and his name is Chris Murphy. He already spoke about the shooting before it was even over. Murphy was on the floor of the U.S. Senate making this political statement. Take a listen.
This happens nowhere else other than the United States of America. This epidemic of mass slaughter, this scourge of school shooting after school shooting. It only happens here not because of coincidence, not because of bad luck, but as a consequence of our inaction. We are responsible.
That's a ridiculous statement because the shooter is responsible, of course, John. But I want to get your rebuttal to what Senator Murphy just said there.
Well, I 100% agree with him. Yeah, he's responsible. He's one of the people that advocates not allowing anybody to have a gun in and around a school zone that is a legal, law-abiding citizen that has never committed a crime and is carrying a weapon, concealed legally. Or having volunteers, like I said, military law enforcement, or arming teachers. This is a type of I don't know, I don't want to call him any names. This is a type of person that will stand in front of Congress, in front of his constituents, and scream and argue in front of the world that taking guns completely away from a defensive standpoint is going to protect kids. It's ridiculous. I mean, that'd be the same as if we tried to fight wars without guns. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And you can't, as we see, you can't defend against somebody once they've penetrated into the school and you have a bunch of students crouched. That's the best they have. Go to the back of the room and crouch down on the floor. It doesn't do any good. I sound like I'm angry because I am.